Well, joining us now are our political observers. Susan Smith is principal with Blue Sky Strategy Group, Tim Powers, chairman of Summa Strategies, and Anne McGrath, the NDP's national director. Good to see all three of you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
So let's begin with India here, because the Prime Minister's statement on Monday obviously causing this huge diplomatic row, this fallout. Was it wise of Justin Trudeau to make such an allegation when no one has been charged yet with a crime? I'll begin with you, Susan.
Well, that's a big one. I think he had to do it. There were a number of things that were going on. There's the whole underlying conversation in Canada about foreign interference. So this is something that was going on from a foreign interference perspective that they knew. The other thing is we've heard in the stories that the Globe and Mail was about to go, a news outlet was supposed to go public with a story. So there would have been, I think, some serious fallout if this hadn't taken place. So I think the Prime Minister did what he had to do, was go to the House of Commons, which was the right place to do it. He informed the opposition leaders and he informed the House and the people of Canada at the same time. It's not a light allegation. It clearly came based on evidence. You wouldn't go forward with something like that without it. So it probably wasn't the exact timing that they hoped to have, but the Prime Minister, I think, needed to do what he had to do rather than the country, the world, the opposition leaders finding out on the front page of the newspaper. I continue to be perturbed about why our security system is leaking. I think that's very concerning as a secondary part of this story. But the PM did what he had to do.
What do you think, Tim? Because, beyond maybe not their timing, the wording was very cautious. Credible allegations of a possible link. Those are very choice words to be using in the House.
They are. I think a few things on this. One, we don't know enough to know about why now timing. I've heard, as Susan has said, the media may have been coming forward with a story, you wanted to get ahead of it. Is that a legitimate reason to come out now? I don't know. I think he's also being influenced by the right criticism that came around foreign interference in elections, and perhaps they're trying to get ahead of things as a consequence. It's hard not to be, and I say this acknowledging that there is no reason for us to disbelieve anything that the Prime Minister has said or anybody else has said. But, and I don't want it to be an uber partisan comment, but there is a natural skepticism out there right now, and the time. So, from Susan's perspective, some have said maybe it wasn't ideal timing because the skepticism kicks in here. From a reality-based perspective, it has moved some of the other stories, as it maybe should, off the front page about political polling. But it's unclear yet why Monday was the time.
Well, you're not the first person to say that, because it does change the channel significantly when the Liberals
begin.
The
doggish, but again, no proof. I want
to
be
proof.
really clear.
No proof. Although that has been said. What do you make of it? And considering the huge fallout this has had and the negative impact it's had with our relationship with India, was it wise of the Prime Minister to make that allegation?
Well, it was clearly a shocking announcement. I mean, that's like the definition of a bombshell announcement. And I also would say that he probably had no choice, and that it was a different approach than the one that he had taken on the foreign interference issues earlier. But if there is credible evidence, and you take the Prime Minister of the country at their word when they say something like that, if there is credible evidence that a Canadian citizen was murdered on Canadian soil by a foreign country, I think it's the responsible thing to do to make an announcement of that sort. I think you have to. And I think that while it probably sent shockwaves through the diaspora in Canada, I think it's important for the diaspora to know that this is a matter that is of that critical importance for them, and they have to know that this is that this could potentially be happening in Canada, and that they have to take some steps to protect themselves and to press the government now to actually, bring this to a conclusion where somebody is actually charged and tried and dealt with a punishment.
Okay, but the Hindu is the newspaper in India, and they essentially have used their editorial pages to say the Prime Minister either has to show the proof behind these allegations or basically admit that he got it wrong. And there is a push. We heard Pierre Poilievre saying he wants to hear more of the details behind this allegation. Is it incumbent on the Prime Minister to share more details, more of this intelligence to assure people that this is more than just bluster in the House?
So we have a Modi backing paper in the middle of a Modi election calling for something in India, and we have the leader of the opposition who was initially supportive and very politically neutral in his response to the Prime Minister's statement on Monday. I don't think I don't think Canada should be doing its national security issues on the front page of the newspaper. I don't think Canada should be doing its national security issues on the floor of the House of Commons beyond alerting people. We have the House of Commons committees. There are people that are sworn to secrecy. I think we have mechanisms for those. And fundamentally, we are a country with a rule of law. And so rule of law, the process will take place. I am sure that the timing of this announcement was not ideal from the Prime Minister's perspective, but if our security system is leaking, and we've determined that that's in fact the case, and I hope they catch the leaker very soon, I think it's important for the Prime Minister to tell the story based on the facts that are there. But in no circumstances, as a Canadian citizen, do I want national security secrets or tactics or whatever aired on the front page of the newspaper? Because guess what? The bad guys go do something else.
I agree with a lot of that, but I think the challenge right now, though, steps outside the protecting national security. And I think you must always protect national security. But the Prime Minister's created a political problem of his own making that dates back a little bit about bits and pieces of information. Yes, some of it's come from leakers. There's been bits and pieces from testimony when they've been called before the committees to talk about foreign interference. But I think there is this climate of expectation out there now that he needs to say something more. And it shouldn't be national security, but if there's a way to add more here, until he does that, those questions, whether legitimate or not, are going to come. And he's got to figure out a way how to move that along.
Okay. Anne?
I think that if Pierre Poilievre wants to see some of the evidence, he has the ability to do that because he has refused to get the appropriate security clearances. So it's a pretty contradictory sort of stance to take, to say, I want to see the evidence, but I refuse to get the appropriate security clearances in order to be able to see the evidence.
Because he wants to talk about it.
Okay.
Right? Poilievre wants to air it and play politics with all of it. And that's not wise, that's not smart, and that's not how we roll as a country. That's not how you do good law enforcement. That's not how you do good national security.
And throw an air of suspicion on the whole, like make people question whether or not it was the right thing to do or not. And I think that's the quandary, I think, for the government now, is that they have an opposition leader who won't look at the evidence, won't get the appropriate security clearances, and they have had to be very, very probably circumspect in what they can and can't say.
Okay, very quickly, because I know you want to say something.
No, but I think there's the broader climate out there, too. It's not just Pierre Poilievre's problem, though there are things, I agree with Anne, that he can do. But there is a public climate, not just created by Pierre Poilievre, that is looking for a bit more transparency.
Okay. Listen, let's pause this. Obviously, the story's not going away. We'll pick it up again. But I also want to talk to you three about what we heard from the Alberta Premier today, Danielle Smith. This idea that they're going to move forward, investigating the possibility of pulling out of the CPP and establishing an independent Alberta pension plan. Take a listen to what we heard from the Alberta Premier.
This is the issue that we have always had in Alberta, is that many of these federal programs are stacked against us. And this one, I think, shows how dramatically stacked against Albertans it is and why it's impacting our seniors. They could have higher benefits. It's impacting our workers. They could have lower premiums. It's impacting our employers. They would be able to have savings that would allow them to invest back in their business. That's what we've got to be, that's what we're helping to educate the rest of the country on.
Okay, listen, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to do a quick go around here. Get your thoughts on why she's doing this and how worried Ottawa needs to be about this possibility. I'll begin with you.
Grandstanding. This is pure political ideology for Premier Smith. This is something that she's always espoused. I think this is a fight with the rest of Canada, and it's actually a fight that most Albertans don't want. This is not what people are thinking about when they open their fridges and they sit down at their dinner table and they make their cup of tea and talk about it. So I think she's making a move that could jeopardize the pension plans, not only of Albertans, but the rest of the country. And I think she's going to hear about it from people. What she's putting forward is something that jeopardizes labor market mobility, jeopardizes, I think, bigger is better when it comes to pension plans, I think, from a security perspective. And she's pursuing this from an ideological perspective only. This is a Danielle Smith idea.
It's a campaign promise, and Anne has worked in Alberta, so she knows this better than us, but it plays to some of the base out there. If we control it, we can do better. But as Susan well articulated, calculated, the thing with investments is if you have more of them and you lump them together and you get a good return, everybody benefits. When you take a chunk out and put it somewhere else, you're less likely probably to have the same benefit of the investment. That's Investing 101 for you today, Michael.
Okay, Anne?
There is so much to say about this. First of all, Tim raised earlier the whole idea of changing channels. It's an old political move, right? You try and change the channel when things aren't going well. She has an absolute crisis on her hands with the E. coli outbreak in the childcare system in Calgary, and this looks like a channel changer. It's not something that they campaigned on in an election that we just had. It is something that will be opposed by many Albertans, many Albertans. It's not something Albertans are looking for. It will be bad for Albertans, and it will be bad for Canadians. It will cost everybody more. It will not bring the same kind of benefits for the same reasons that Susan and Tim outlined. Many business groups are opposed to it, including the Alberta Chamber of Commerce. This is just a bad idea all around, and their numbers are very suspect. They come from, I think it's a 1962 study, very suspect numbers. And if every province used those calculations, the cost of everybody pulling out of the Canada Pension Plan is 9 times the worth of the Canada Pension Plan. So it's all around unbelievably bad politics, bad policy, bad for Albertans, bad for Canadians.
Okay, but the genie's out of the bottle. They're at the investigative stage, but the genie's out of the bottle, and they're making these very powerful arguments that may convince some. Is that going to be hard to counter?
Sure, it could work with some people who feel it, but she's not factually. I mean, I get she's trying to keep a campaign promise. I don't disagree with that. It's probably a distraction. But if you actually want to protect your citizenry and have a solvent pension plan and one that has the greater potential to work, then this probably isn't the path you go down.
I think she's picking a fight with all of the premiers, much of the rest of the country. As I said, it'll have to go to referendum, I think. And I don't think it's one she's going to win.
Okay.
She's committed that it'll go to a referendum. She has to now, I think that the job now for the opposition and for people who care about this is to ensure that she does go to a referendum.
Well, imagine the amount of money that is going to be spent on chasing this. There's housing affordability issues in Alberta. There's an opioid crisis. There's the E. coli breakout. And this is what Danielle Smith wants to spend a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of resources and energy on. I think it's going to annoy a lot of people.
Okay. Well, again, another one that we're going to follow, but right now, thank you for the time. So, Susan, Tim, Anne, really nice to have you back. Thank you for this.
Nice to be back.
Thank you.